All right, this is your fractions, decimals, and percents notes. Converting fractions to percents. A fraction can be written as a percent when the denominator is 100. If the denominator is a friendly number, we're talking about easy whole numbers, okay? We're not talking about like 1.78326. That's not a friendly number. 5 is a friendly number. 12 is a friendly number, okay? So if the denominator is a friendly number, you can scale up or down or use a proportion. So if my original fraction is 2/5, but I want to turn this into a percent, we have to change our fraction so that it's out of 100 and use that numerator to tell us our percent. How do I go from 2 to 40? We're going to multiply by 20. How do I go from 5 to 100? Multiply by 20. 2 times 20 equals 40. 5 times 20 equals 100. So times 20 times 20. And what percent are we talking about? We're really talking about 40%. But you've got to make your proportions. Number 1, it says convert each fraction to a percent by making each denominator 100. So if I write 6 over 20 equals blank over 100. Yeah, we can cross multiply and then take that answer and divide by 20. Or you can tell me how I go from 20 to 100, and we're going to multiply by 5. And you're going to use the same pattern. 6 times 5 is 30. So we're talking about 30%. 7/10 equals what over 100? How do I go from 10 to 100? Multiply by 10. 7 times 10 equals 70. Using that top number, our numerator, it gives us our percentage. 70%. 60 over 50. How do I get to 100? We're going to multiply by 2. Times 2. 120. And so what percent are we talking about? 120%. Tape diagrams and number lines. Not all fractions can easily be multiplied by a whole number to get a denominator of 100. For example, 1/3. You can't take 3 times a whole number and get 100. So sometimes people use tape diagrams. Divide the tape diagram or number line into the same number of sections as the denominator. So in this case, we would split a rectangle into 3 pieces. Shade the number of parts indicated by the numerator. Numerator, denominator. Which means our rectangle would be split in 3 pieces and we would color in one of those pieces. Okay, so here's another example. Example A, 1/8 is equal to what percent? Okay, so we've got a tape diagram and a number line. Our number line is already split into 8 different pieces. So this would represent 1/8. Okay, but we're trying to figure out what percent that is. So in your calculator, you would type 1 divided by 8 equals, and you're going to end up getting 0.125. And for us to go from a decimal to a percent, we move our decimal point 2 spots to the right. So our percent is really going to be 12.5%. Make sure you put your percent sign. If we were to use a tape diagram, we would cut this rectangle into 8 different pieces and color in one of them. And then do same thing. 1 divided by 8 equals 0.125. Multiply that by 100, or move your decimal 2 spots to the right, and we get 12.5%. Create a tape diagram or a number line to determine an equivalent percent. Okay, so split this into 3 sections. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3. And we are going to color in one section. If you do 1 divided by 3 in your calculator, you're going to get 0.3333333. It's going to repeat. You're going to multiply it by 100 and move your decimal point 2 spots to the right. And you're going to figure out our percent is 33.3 repeating percent. Three-eighths is equal to what percent? Three-eighths. If you do 3 divided by 8 in your calculator, you get 0.375. And if you move your decimal point 2 spots to the right, you figure out it's 37.5%. So let's see. 3/8. Where to plot that on the number line? I split this into fourths, okay? 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4, 1 whole. Okay, but I have 3/8. Well, 1/4 is the same thing as 2/8, which means 2/4 would be 4/8. To plot 3/8 is going to go right in the middle. All right, converting fractions to decimals. A fraction can be converted to a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator. So if you do 3 divided by 4 equals in your calculator, you should get 0.75. Convert each fraction below to the decimal equivalent. 7 divided by 8 equals 0.875. 1 divided by 25 equals, in your calculator, 0.04. 1 4/5, or 1's going to stay the same, and you're just going to do 4 divided by 5. 4 divided by 5 gives you 0.8. Converting decimals to percents. A decimal can be converted to a percent by multiplying by 100 or moving the decimal 2 places to the right. So if I start with my decimal, 0.85, and I move it 2 spots to the right, I figure out it's just 85%. 0.7, 2 spots to the right, is just 70%. 1.25, 2 spots to the right, is 125%. Number 9, a box is filled 4/5 of the way with packing peanuts. What percent represents the fraction of the box filled with packing peanuts? So set up your proportion to figure out what percent we're actually talking about. How do I go from 5 to 100? Times 20. 4 times 20 equals 80. So that means 80 boxes would be colored in the grid. So what percent are we talking about? 80%. Marcy lives 1.15 miles away from her grandmother. What fraction represents the distance between Marcy's house and her grandmother's? Our whole number 1 tells me that it's going to stay the same, okay? We already have one whole entire grid colored in. All 100 boxes are filled in. But then we have a second grid, and it has 15 boxes colored in because that decimal is 15/100ths. 15/100ths. Okay, so there's the distance, but it can be simplified. 5 is our common number. How many 5s make a 15? 3. How many 5s make a 100? 20. There is your final answer. Last one. 19 out of the 20 students in Mr. Gonzalez's science class are attending a field trip. 19 out of 20. What percent best represents the portion of the class that is attending the field trip? So set up your proportion to figure out how many out of 100 that is. 20 to 100, you're going to multiply by 5. 19 times 5 gives us 95. So what percent of the class is going on this trip? 95%.